to galacticconnection.com, one of the most popular blogs on the World Wide Web today for alternative news. Stay tuned for the latest information on our world shift from enslavement to galactic involvement, as well as current intel on any blockages impeding us from our sovereign birthright. Knowledge and self-mastery are key at this time. Our commitment is to present you with the latest breaking conspiratorial articles, off-world messages, exopolitics, cutting-edge technologies and sciences, and also an ever-significant intertwining of spiritual support and metaphysical scope that one needs to dive down the rabbit hole in search for truth with balance. We are truly on the horizon of a new golden age filled with the promise for more love, worldwide peace, and accelerated intuitive skills, where every living being can exist in cohesion and abundance. It is whatever we envision and dream this new world to be. I say to you now, let's redefine the new world to the beginnings of our own precious heaven on earth. Galactic Connection is here to provide the pulse of Mother Earth through an eclectic range of interviews each Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Station 2 on BBS Radio, expanding your perspectives on how we can once and for all take back our freedoms, our joy, and our connection with our mighty I Am presence. Our intention remains true to connect hearts and minds everywhere in order to obtain global unity and galactic and universal acceptance. Our discussions will continue to cover anything to do with galactic society and our involvement with our galactic brothers and sisters. Our guests are experts in their fields, and our radio shows have been coined as some of the most thought-provoking out there. In addition to our daily blog, which runs 365 days a year, we also offer a realm of healing services such as our world-renowned implant removal processes, our spiritual past life clearings, our galactic violet ray alchemy from Alexandra, who shares in the lineage of Merlin, and other cutting-edge healing technologies. Check our site out at galacticconnection.com now, sending you a wave of light, love, and inspiration, and a personal hug and thank you for listening to our Galactic Connection radio show and visiting our blog today. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alexandra Meadors of galacticconnection.com, and this is a pre-recorded interview for April 12th, 2016. And I have with me today a very special guest. I've had my eye on him for a while. I've been watching all the controversial stuff that kind of floats around him all the time, actually surfacing that which has been buried within the American history in particular, but all over the world, frankly. And this is Scott Wolter. Scott Wolter is a world-renowned forensic geologist and specialist in the secret history of North America. He is an author, a researcher, and a television host for the series, H2 series called America Unearthed. Scott has also been the founder and president of American Petrographic Services and the inventor of the Archeo petrography, which I'd like to talk about. And I hope I didn't just destroy that word.
Good job.
Scott has also been involved in analyzing the concrete remains of the World Trade Center after the September 11th terrorist attacks, which is what really got my attention. His first television appearance involved the Kensington rune stones, which were discovered in Minnesota in 1898 and revealed in the documentary Holy Grail in America, which I can't imagine any of you that have not already seen that. He's the author of many books, one of the latest, which is Compelling New Evidence. So Scott, welcome today. And I also wanted to get everybody to be aware that he will be at the new Living Expo from April 29th to May 1st at the San Mateo County Event Center in San Mateo, California. So welcome.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate that. That's a lovely introduction. And just so you know, the New Living Expo, I'll be speaking on Saturday. I think that's the 30th, from 11 to 1 o'clock. So I get 2 hours, and that's good because my wife can tell you I love to ramble on because it's really, there's so much good information. It's a complicated story, but as I say, people say the devil's in the detail. I say the truth is in the details. So we're going to get a chance to lay it all out.
Well, do us a favor and explain the petrography that you have created and really made famous.
Our Archeo petrography. Well, you know, take a step back. The work that I've been doing when we founded American Petrographic Services, really what it is, it's the microscopic examination in our business of concrete and rock primarily. And what we do is we will get problem concrete that comes in, low strength, cracking, scaling, whatever the case may be, something has gone wrong. And so they'll take a sample, they'll send it to us, and we will examine it and try to determine, first of all, what caused the problem. But the thing they really want to know is, whose fault is it? So we get involved in a lot of litigation, as you can imagine. And the one thing that I tell people is, you know, look, the concrete didn't crack just to make you mad. It did make you mad, but there's a reason why it happened. So I try to depersonalize the situation by saying, look, let's just stick to the science, let the science talk, and whatever the results are, the results are. And so we had a successful business. Obviously, you talked about the Pentagon work. That'll probably be the thing that people will talk about the day that they put me in the ground. And it was an amazing thing. It was an honor and a privilege to be involved in that work. Again, you know, something happened and we were asked to do our work and we did it. So,
and it also caused a lot of controversy to follow you around as well. I mean, it's one of the main reasons that why you experience what you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that I've been contacted for years by people in the conspiracy community that have a lot of questions about what happened at 9/11.
Sure.
And I can tell you, look, nobody likes a good conspiracy better than me, but you know, you have to have some hard evidence to bring to the discussion. Otherwise, I'm really not interested in talking about what could have been, you know, maybe. Sure. I want some hard stuff, and if there is, I'll go there as far as we need to go. In the case of the Pentagon, I can tell you that it was a 757. There were people on that plane, and what happened there is what they said happened there. Now, what happened up at Ground Zero, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting questions that have been asked. I wasn't there, so I can't speak to that, but I can tell you what happened at the Pentagon.
Cool. Well, so going back to your Archeo petrography.
Right.
Can you explain to us exactly how do you, date and get information from the rocks and that sort of thing?
Well, basically what we've done is applied the same science that we use on concrete and rock in the construction industry to these archaeological lithic or stone artifacts that have come into our lab over the years. It started with the Kensington runestone, and what I was asked to do in that investigation was to try to age date the carvings. Was there a way that we would be able to say something about how long ago the inscription was carved? And the fact of the matter is, we had never done any work like that before, but we came up with an idea that we thought would work. And basically what I did was I identified key minerals in the runestone and looked at the weathering of those same minerals on tombstones of known age. And we had all the same criteria in the experiment, the same mineral grain size, the same weathering environment. The tombstones are both above, at, and below grade. The runestone was found basically at grade and then angling down about a foot. So really it worked beautifully as far as having everything replicated, if you will. And so with the dates on the tombstones, I just went back in time until the minerals began to come off the surface of the tombstones. On the runestone, they were already gone. So it worked really well, and I was able to conclude that the weathering of the inscription was older than 200 years, because that's when they began to come off the surface. They're all gone on the runestone. Now, and that's from when it was pulled out of the ground in 1898, because it hasn't been in the weathering environment since. It's been indoors. So in my mind, in our business, everything boils down to logic. if this, then that, and if not this, then this, and it really makes it very easy. And in this case, the question was, it's either a late 19th century hoax or it's not. And if it's not, what have you got? Well, it's dated 1362. The language, the runes, the dialect, everything is consistent with that period. The weathering says it's not a late 19th century hoax, so logic demands it must be genuine. So I wrote a report and published all my findings. They were peer-reviewed, in spite of what a lot of people say. They don't want it to be peer-reviewed because they don't want to believe the results. And
well, you know what, Scott, the other thing that's going on here is there's been a lot of suggestion that not only do we live in this hidden hand of who's really running the show, so to speak, but there's been an incredible amount of work done to hide the true history of humanity. And I really feel like you have been divinely guided. I mean, I've been watching your series, your Pirate Treasure series with the Knights Templar. I mean, I'm just fascinated. And the fact that you just continue to keep finding artifacts and being able to connect Madagascar with Europe, with the Knights Templar, with Jesus and his bloodline. I mean, it's it goes right in line with Ralph Ellis. Are you familiar with him?
I know Ralph very well. I have never met Ralph, but we have corresponded for years. I've read all of his books. I think he's amazing, and I've tried to get him on the show. It just didn't work out for whatever reason, but I love his work.
I did too.
His latest book on the Grail, have you seen that thing? It's about this thick.
I've heard about it. I haven't. I don't have a lot of time to read, unfortunately, but I'm very familiar with this work because I have a very, very special connection with the Knights Templar. So anything to do with the Knights Templar, I'm on it, which is why I've been watching you. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you.
Well, yeah, I guess I've become known as a world expert in the Knights Templar. I never thought about it that way. More from this sort of esoteric, mystical side, and of course the whole controversy with the Jesus and Mary Magdalene bloodline, which I realized the controversy behind it and why it's difficult for some people, but I wasn't raised with any religion in our home. My dad was a Freemason, and he just didn't expose me to any of that. So I didn't have any cleansing that I had to do of this, BS story that the Roman Church has been preaching for 1700 years. So I didn't have to clean anything. I just look at the world in a pragmatic way, and in dealing with a lot of really knowledgeable people. And I just want to make sure you make one thing clear. A lot of the research that I am talking about has been, the advancements that we've made have been in large part due to a large collaboration with many people that are doing related research. It's not all me.
Yes.
And I really like the fact, and I've always embraced this concept of sharing what I know with other people, like-minded people, because they're going to bring, this person's going to bring something, that person brings something else, and all of a sudden we have an epiphany discovery that I couldn't have made without that person and that person. So when you get people working together with a common purpose, it's amazing. You can go 100 times further than some territorial person working in the shadows by themselves.
I agree, and especially if it has anything to do with bringing the truth forward. I would like to ask you, why do you feel that the discovery of the Kensington runestones is so significant with your work in tracking down the connection with the Knights Templar and the Jesus bloodline?
Well, it's funny you ask that question, because very recently, like in the last 2 months, I have made a profound discovery on the runestone. And that discovery was something that I guess I already knew, but I didn't fully understand and appreciate until I became initiated myself. But the carver was initiated in the ancient mysteries of Isis and Osiris.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can prove it.
Oh my God.
I haven't published this yet. I've written the paper. I've got it in my new book, but I haven't talked about it in public yet. I've talked about it to 3 different groups of Masonic organizations. One of them is an education lodge, and a lot of eyebrows were raised. And when they raise their eyebrows in the education lodge, that means you've got them. And so this is a profound discovery. And what I'm talking about is the message itself. When you read it as a narrative, it just doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. For one day, we were fishing one day. What do you mean? Obviously, they were fishing every day to sustain themselves. So clearly, they're not going to take the time to carve that on this important land claim inscription. So what does it really mean? Well, I didn't understand what it meant, but clearly now, fisher of men is a reference to Jesus.
Very true. Gosh.
And so I know that's it. And of course, we have ABM on the rune stone, 3 Latin letters, which of course was a problem for the scholars for a long time. Well, ABM with a punch on the lower right leg of the M is clearly a reference to the Magdalene, to his wife. And, ABM, people say, well, this is a reference to Mother Mary. Well, that story didn't happen. So if it's not a reference to her, who is it? And, in esoteric circles, as I'm sure you're aware, different symbols have different meanings depending on your point of view.
Yes.
Is definitely one of them. And in this case, it's a reference to the Magdalene for sure.
Well, so what is the significance of the hooked X because you talk a lot about that.
Well, the hooked X is really the key to the whole thing, because the hooked X is a symbol that nobody had ever seen. The scholars said, well, we've never seen that, so it must be a hoax. No, you've never seen it. That's all it means. And my geology proved to me, again, going back to logic, that if the runestone is genuine, there has to be an explanation for all these anomalies in the inscription, including the hooked X. And I just knew that, for me, having done forensics now for 31 years, if there's one thing I've learned, people care, rocks don't. Rocks don't care. They don't have bad days. You can't hurt their feelings. They just are. So I trust them. It's not that I don't trust people. Well, actually, there's a lot of people I don't trust, but I think you get the point. I'm just saying. But anyway, you get the point. So by following the evidence trail of the language, the runes, it led right to the Cistercians, right to the Templars, right to Jerusalem, right to the Talpiot tomb, to the Jesus ossuary, and sitting front and center on the lid of his ossuary is the hooked X. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it, but there you go.
Unbelievable. And then elucidate us with the whole cross and skull, the crossbones and skull, because it's a totally different, it's a more positive, impression about the crossbones and skull.
Right. Well, I can see that you've done your homework, so I'm impressed. Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the 1st century and the burial practices of a particular sect of Egypto-Jews, I will call them, of the Essene, Jesus's people. And basically what they would do is they had a unique burial practice where only the family could process the body of the deceased. And they would bring them into these underground tombs, and they would anoint the body with perfumes and oils, and then they would wrap them in a shroud, bring them inside the burial chamber, and place them on a bench or a shelf that was actually cut into the rock. And then they would leave the body there for 1 to 2 years. And then they would come back and collect the bones, and they would place them inside of a stone bone box that's, only big enough so that the 2 largest bones in the body, the femurs, would fit in crossed, and then they would put the skull in last. And that's the origin of the skull and crossbones symbol. It is a symbol of death. It's a reminder of death and that life is short and to live it to the fullest, but it's also a symbol of reverence for Jesus and his people.
Amazing. Now, how does this relate to the Ankh?
Well, the Ankh is really nothing more than a Tao Cross with a handle on it. That's what it is. And on this symbol that's on Jesus's ossuary, is actual monogram of two symbols, the hooked X and the Tao Cross.
Oh my God.
Did you know this?
Yes, no, I do because I've researched you, but
Okay.
I'm just amazed how there have literally been little morsels of breadcrumbs that you've just been finding one after the other to connect the dots on this.
It's what I do for a living. I mean, I'm a forensic investigator. That's what I do. So,
fantastic.
well, and you know what? I think sometimes people make things harder than they need to be. This was not easy because you've got a group of people that were covering their tracks every step of the way.
I bet.
They were doing things in secret. I mean, this was a pretty high stakes game of poker with the Roman Catholic Church that they were ideologically opposed to, but yet had aligned themselves with them. You know, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. And that's exactly what they did. And in essence, we're talking about the greatest coup d'etat in history that nobody knows about. And, you know, when you read about the Templars and this whole dynamic from an academic standpoint, I mean, I laugh out loud at how much these people don't understand what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's laughable. It really is. But anyway, getting back to the Tao Cross. On Jesus's ossuary, we have both the hooked X and the Tao Cross. And it's as a monogram. And what I suggested to the Israeli scholars is I've always believed, and I think I could prove, that the hooked X, which is being used for the A sound in the 5 North American rune stones, including the Kensington stone, that it's a straight line version of the Hebrew Aleph. If you look at the Aleph symbol, it looks like a hooked X. And if you carve it with straight lines on a stone, that's what you get, the hooked X. So, and the Tau is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So I suggested that what this symbol is on Jesus's ossuary is the Alpha, Omega, beginning and end.
Beautiful.
And they loved it. And so
wow.
I think that's what it is. But getting back to the Tau Cross, why the Tau Cross? Well, the Tau Cross is, in fact, I think it's a direct piece of evidence that ties Jesus's Egyptian heritage right back to Egypt. The Tau Cross, or the Ankh, as you were saying, is the most important symbol in Egyptian mythology. It's a symbol of life. It's a symbol of resurrection. And it goes back even farther back to its use as a nilometer. It was used to measure the height of the Nile in the spring, and it would tell the people if they were going to have famine, and you know, if it was low, if it was too high, they'd have flooding and famine, or if it hit right in the wheelhouse, they'd have prosperity among the people. So it was literally a predictor of life and death in Egypt. And so that's why it evolved into this most important symbol in Egyptian mythology. And there you have it on Jesus's ossuary. Are you kidding me? It's amazing.
You must feel so honored to be the one that's exposing this, number one. And I think what the audience is probably wondering right now is, how much resistance have you run into through your travels of revealing this sort of stuff? I kept thinking about that when I was watching your Templar series, as to why aren't there a whole bunch of people sitting over at the Isle of Saint Marie, Isle of Saint Marie or something? That
Ile Saint Marie.
Yeah. Okay. I kept thinking, why aren't there so many people blocking you from discovering this?
Well, you know, I think there's a couple reasons. I mean, first of all, let's face it, Dan Brown and Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the authors of that book, they took a lot of the early bullets. And so it's, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, those deep, dark family secrets, when they first come out, everybody's shocked. And then after 5 minutes, they go, okay, well, I guess we got to deal with it. Life goes on, right? And I think really that's where we're at right now. I mean, the whole idea of a Jesus bloodline, has anybody not heard that story?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
And now what's happening is the evidence is starting to come forward that is, at this point, I mean, let's face it, it's done, okay? It's what happened. And, you know, again, as a pragmatist, as an investigator, you know what I say to people is I say, look, first of all, just dial back for a second. Think about it pragmatically, logically, okay? Everybody walking on the planet today, every last person has ancestors that were around 2,000 years ago. Fact, okay? Why is it such a mystery or unbelievable to imagine that these two people would not have descendants alive today?
Sure.
We all have ancestors that, you know, had children. Why couldn't they and have those descendants walking the planet today? And in fact, they do. It's not a difficult concept. It's not.
No. And there's a lot of ancient script that does continue to emphasize that the descendants were sent throughout the world. They were dispersed in seven major continents so that they could spread the word. So, you know, I think that the other thing that's interesting that Ralph Ellis really points out, and we've all kind of known this, is that history has been rewritten by whom?
Oh, the winners.
Exactly. And who do we trust? Do we trust the government who writes the history books in the schools? I mean,
yes,
you know,
I believe everything they say. Anything they say is perfect.
And that's really what you're doing. You're just blowing holes in all of this it's just things and events that we have just accepted as fact, that you're just blowing holes in all of it. I love it. I just love it.
Hey, you know what? My job is to get to the truth. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. And you know what? I've put people out of business that screwed up on a big project. I'm sorry, man. These are the results. You're a nice person. I wish it didn't happen to you, but it is what it is, and you got to deal with it, right?
Right.
And so if this is what the story is, it's what the story is. I mean, what do you want from me? I mean, I don't make things up for anybody. I'm not smart enough to remember BS. I can barely remember the truth. So,
well, hey, you know what? You were selected because you have the strength to withstand the controversy and be able to stand unwavering in the truth. That's why you're doing what you're doing. I wanted to ask you, how have you linked Jesus and his family to the Knights Templar?
Well, that's an easy one. If you follow the historical thread of the Merovingian families into southern France, and if you look at the names of the people who founded the Cistercians and were the original founders of the Knights Templar order, they're all part of the same families. And you know, at some point we're going to be able to tie this all together with DNA. We know what the truth is, and these families know their own history. A lot of them know who they are and what their destinies have been. But, you know, there's another piece to this puzzle that sort of answers a lot of the questions that, you know, the question you asked about how do we put up with all the controversy, and, you know, are you worried about people trying to keep you quiet? And I've never been worried about any of that stuff. But, you know, I know you've heard this said before. People say, and I've heard the natives say this a lot, and Templar mystics say this to me a lot, that it's time that the truth came out. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but what the heck does that mean? And for a long time I asked that question. And you know who helped me understand the answer? Was Ralph Ellis. Precession of the equinoxes, and how we have just finished this time period of Pisces, the fisher king that I mentioned before. And it's not just that we've finished this roughly 2,000 year long period of the ages and precession, and how the constellations, the 12 primary constellations of the zodiac move around us in the zodiacal belt, but we've also finished this 26,000 year long cycle, the end of the Mayan calendar, the end of the world, as the doomsayers would say, which was nonsense, of course. We've just started a brand new cycle, but it's important for a lot of reasons. And what I say in my lectures to people is, I go, we just lived through one of the most profound moments in human history, and nobody gets it yet.
Yes.
But it's
absolutely.
a time of, yeah, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It's a time of profound change. And so this whole idea that it's time that the truth came out, and lo and behold, look what's happening. The Catholic Church is dying in front of our eyes, and all this new information is coming out because it's supposed to, I guess. And
well, it has to, Scott. It has to.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I agree, because let's face it, we're killing our planet, we're killing ourselves, and you know the main thrust of this is in my opinion, is keeping, you know, the oil-based world economy going, and it's a select few that are benefiting beyond what they need and controlling the situation, and they're only going to change it when they have to.
Yeah.
And you think we'd be smart enough to realize, okay, we need to do things differently. We have the technology, so let's just do it. But,
yeah, well, and that's what we're being faced with is we need to get it right this time. And we need to react differently to that which we see as the blemish and the miscreation in this planet. This is one of those blemishes, which is all of the real true history has been hidden from us.
yeah.
And you're one of those, you know, pieces of the puzzle that's exposing that reality. I think it's wonderful. I have a question for you. You know, they say that there were a core 9 men who started and initiated the Knights Templar. Do you feel that those are the core 9 bloodlines?
Well, we know who they are. I have not personally spent a lot of time digging into the genealogy of these people.
Okay.
I would say that they were all part of it for sure. Now, were they representing 9 different tribes or 9 different family groups? I'm not sure. I know that Hugh de Payen was directly connected. He was an uncle of Bernard de Clairvaux, who was the one that launched the Cistercians to meteoric success. And, you know, it's interesting. No important decision in Christendom and in politics during his lifetime was made by anybody without his counsel, including popes. And the funny thing is that if he was so Catholic as some people want to suggest, he could have become Pope anytime he wanted, yet he never did.
Mm.
Why not? Well, the reason's obvious, because he wasn't Catholic.
Right.
But anyway, and he didn't need to. He still had the power and the control to you know, be the puppet master for the events that played out.
I was going to say he probably had a lot more freedom in the position that he was holding. Versus,
well, he was the guy, and in my opinion, I think Bernard de Clairvaux was arguably the most important historical figure in the history of the world, and hardly anybody know who he is, who he was. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing, really.
So how does all of this link with your Pirate Treasure series that's coming out? And by the way, everybody, if you haven't been watching it, it is incredible. Check it out. It's on his series. And tell me exactly the right title.
It's called Pirate Treasure of the Knights Templar.
Okay.
And I was actually brought into that show that was already underway to help sort of bring in that Templar angle. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't have dreamed that it would go as well as it did. I mean, and everything that you saw that I did, I mean, they had these places they wanted me to go, but it all evolved and was discovered as it happened. I mean, it wasn't a.
That's the part that's so cool about it.
Yeah, it was great. But there was a lot of controversy surrounding that series as well, because, as you know, UNESCO went in and they basically said, "Oh, this isn't Captain Kidd's treasure, and he's doing everything wrong," and blah blah blah. And you know, Barry's an interesting guy. He's an older guy. He's an old ship captain, and he likes to have his way, and so he tends to butt heads with people sometimes that he doesn't see eye to eye with. He and I got along just fine, but UNESCO had it out for him. And, you know, and timing sometimes works in weird ways, but when I was in Madagascar, he did not have the permits to be able to dive. I was supposed to dive on these wrecks too, but I didn't get a chance to because when I was there, we couldn't get in the water. So I spent time on Madagascar trying to kill time so that they could get the permits, but eventually after about a week, we had to go. And then they got the permit, and then he found the silver bar. Well, I was the one that noticed on the silver bar the triple Tao.
I know, I just couldn't believe that.
Yeah, I couldn't either, you know. And then, of course, there was all this controversy with, well, UNESCO said, well, it's lead, it's not silver, and, you know, somehow that diminishes its importance. And I said, first of all, in context with the age of 1700, and in the pirate culture, lead was actually more valuable than silver because they used it for lead shot in their weapons, right?
Right.
And they often used, at that time, silver as ballast in the ship. So it wasn't like gold. It wasn't even anywhere close to it. And you could make a case that lead was actually more important than silver at the time, but yet we think about it in a 21st century context, and you can't do that. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter to me if it was silver or lead. It was the symbol that was on the stone that led to the discoveries in India. So it was just amazing. I mean, it worked out for me perfectly.
Now tell the audience about the Tao Cross.
Yeah.
And how this fits in with that piece of lead that was found underwater. And this was found, right? This was found with the Adventure Galley.
The Adventure Galley, yep. That was Captain Kidd's ship. And, you know, a lot of people are like, wow, what was he doing in Madagascar? Well, it was a well-known place where people could hang out and repair their ships and get a little R&R. You know, the Hudson, or the ship company, I'm drawing a blank on but they used to, the patrol ships used to, from England and other parts of Europe, would patrol the western coast of Africa. So the pirates didn't hang out there too much, and they wanted to be sure that they were protecting the ships that were bringing back the most precious cargo from Africa, slaves. But on the eastern side, where Madagascar was, the ships weren't patrolling looking for pirates, so they had free reign over there, and that's why they would hang out there. Well, Captain Kidd is known to have scuttled the Adventure Galley there. That's not a mystery. That's a fact.
Yeah.
But nobody had ever found it yet, because there's a whole bunch of shipwrecks there. And how do you figure out whose is what? Because it's so damn far away, nobody could really, you know, have access to the area. Well, Barry, I think he did find the Adventure Galley. I don't care what UNESCO says. I think the evidence is compelling. And he found, you know, the lead bar, and he said there's a lot more there. He just brought them up. So
I love that little green. It almost looked like jade.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
Well, there was stone, there was wood, there was ivory pieces, there was all kinds of stuff. Porcelain, glass.
So now, what was the connection between Captain Kidd and the Knights Templar? You mentioned that you have compelling evidence that he was doing something secrecy, like a secret mission.
Right. Well, I don't know if he was necessarily a member of the Order of Christ. I don't think that he was, but whether he was a Freemason at the time, dealing with, you know, a lot of the Freemasons back at that time were people who were a member of certain secret societies. Rosicrucians and some of the others were well-known, wealthy guys that were dealing in you know, various business operations, making money like crazy. And they did things under the radar. And a lot of the stuff they were doing wasn't what we would consider cool at the time. They were, you know, making money hand over fist, doing things under the radar, as it were, paying people off to do certain things. A lot of people that we would be surprised if we knew who their names were. I think Captain Kidd got caught up in some of that. I don't think he's completely innocent of all charges. I don't think he was this notorious pirate that he was made out to be. But in this cabal of wealthy business people, many of whom were Freemasons operating, you know, clandestinely, he just became expendable, and they took him out. I think that's really what happened. So, but when he ended up over in the you know, the Indian Ocean, in India, Madagascar, and in that area, he was dealing in the same area that the Order of Christ was dealing in, and there may have been some conflict there. So the Order of Christ was the Knights Templar. I mean, this is one of the myths that has been perpetrated by academia for a long time. I mean, after 1307, that was it. The Templars ceased to exist. That's BS.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that, with all the research I've done as well.
Well, it's a fact. I mean, I can tell you, I mean, in Portugal alone, I mean, the King and Queen of Spain, that was their army. They were fighting the Moors who were attacking from the south, and when the put down came down and Pope said you have to disband, the King and Queen said, are you kidding me? I'm not going to disband my army. It's not happening. So to appease the church, they simply changed their name to the Order of Christ. They continued on. And in fact, the Knights Templar order as an official order under a different name continued for another 500 plus years in Portugal until they were disbanded in 1835. So, you know, the prevailing thought and wisdom of the Knights Templar is just wrong. And my job is to get things right. It's not about getting what I want. People think, oh, you're just doing this because it proves your theories. No, I'm doing it because it's right. It happens to prove my theories. Well, good for me. I mean, what do you know, it is what it is. I like, come on.
Well, Scott, you know, there is a prophecy from the Knights Templar directly that states that I believe it was in 700 years they would surface again, and that was in August of 2013.
Well, there's not a lot of people know about this guy. They've heard of something called the Malachy Prophecy. And I love the Malachy Prophecy. Brother Malachy was the closest confidant of Bernard de Clairvaux. Bernard sent Malachy to found the first Cistercian abbey in Ireland on the lands that are now what they call their lands, they call their granges. And on that grange at Mellifont that he founded is Newgrange, the megalithic site Newgrange. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, look it up. It's more amazing than Stonehenge.
Cool.
And it's a World Heritage Site. There's actually 3 sites, Mount, Doubt, and Newgrange. Look it up. You'll go, oh my God.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I do. I have, yes.
It's a Venus chamber. Everybody thinks it's a solar chamber, but it's actually aligned to the planet Venus. And it was on the Cistercians' lands. And anyway, so Malachy, in the middle of the 12th century, said this: in 2012, the current Pope would resign. The new Pope would not be from the old world, he would be from the new world, and he would be the last Pope. He's 2 for 3 so far. And people have asked me, they say, well, how can he be the last Pope? Well, I'll tell you what I think could happen. If this whole story about the bloodline of Jesus and Mary is true, the reason that the first Pope Paul was founded is because the leader of the church, Jesus, had been killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was no succession, right? Well, what if somebody comes forward and they can prove their genealogical heritage to Jesus, and they say, I'm retaking over leadership of the Roman, of the Christian church, not Roman. All of a sudden, there's no need for a pope, is there?
Mm-mm. Well, and on top of that, what do you think about the fact that when they did discover a lot of the archaeological artifacts under the dome of the rock, and supposedly it took them something like 9 months to not only travel to the Vatican, but tie things up with the Vatican quote, where they were to present something that was notorious and historical to the Vatican.
Well, we'll never see those documents. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that, but
that remains a mystery, supposedly, to this day.
Well, it's not a mystery. I have to. I'll reserve comment on that, but I will say that I could probably tell you an awful lot about that story.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely have to have you back on for that.
Well, you know, it's interesting. If you look at symbolism, you can learn an awful lot about the way the Templars operated, about the way history has unfolded by looking at certain things. One of the things that people should pay attention to is the number 9.
Yes.
9 knights, 9 levels under the temple. There's a lot of, on the face side of the Kensington inscription, there are 9 lines of text, 3 on the side for a total of 12. Is that a coincidence? No.
This is the 9-year, 2016.
Yeah, there's all kinds of examples that I could show you, and there's a reason for it. And I'm going to talk about what those reasons are in the new book. I've got some revelations that are coming out in this new book that's going to make your hair stand on end. And it's all supported by factual evidence. But at the same time, now that I have been initiated, I understand the other language, and I'm going to teach people a little bit about that, how they can use it, how they can read things that they couldn't read before, that were hidden in plain sight the whole time.
That is so fabulous. Oh my God. I mean, I'm telling you, everybody's going to be salivating to learn about our lineage.
Well, you know what? You hit the nail on the head. The one thing that I would say about these people, the bloodline that we call the Venus families, that eventually evolved into the Templars and then into modern Freemasonry. But one of their main tenets that is so important to, it's always been important, it's even more important today, is seek light, seek knowledge. If you look at some of these big movers and shakers that are part of these Venus families, they were the ones that put their money to build universities and colleges and institutions of education.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, let's face it, the biggest problem this world faces today is overpopulation. And the way that we're going to get this thing back into balance isn't by killing people, it's through education. It's a fact that the more educated women are, the fewer number of children they have. And that has been the antithesis of things like the Roman Church that wants to, you know, I don't have to tell you what they did to women. And I think that is part of what has created the mess that we have today.
Now, you know, now speaking of the Catholic Church, do you feel that there is another hidden element of the church, another tangent of perhaps the Illuminati that is really trying to help people like you to expose the truth?
I can tell you that the biggest supporters that I have been the Freemasons. And they're supposed to be the ones that are running the world and don't want a guy like me to expose these things that they're supposedly covering up.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that the Freemasons I've interacted with, and I've interacted with some top level people, that's not what they're about. They support me like you can't imagine. They have let me into their libraries. They have shared many secrets with me. And they've said, look, there's nothing you can't talk about. And believe me, if they said, don't talk about it, I wouldn't. I've never been threatened. I've been insulted. I've been verbally, you know, but it's by people, most of it's been driven by fear, quite frankly. And I don't worry about it. Look, call me all the names you want. When you're done calling me names, do you want to talk about the evidence? You want to screw around some more? Just let me know when you're ready. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't.
Hey, for most of us watching you, we know you've been divinely chosen to take this task on hand. Seriously, it's not an easy feat to jump into something where you're blowing open every single belief system about the core of our history. And the fact that you're exposing that in the United States of America, because so much emphasis is placed on Europe,
right.
on Africa, on Asia. You know, there's, you know, all we're ever told when we're brought up in this country, at least, is, oh, we're such a young nation. We don't have a lot of history here. This is what we've been told over and over.
No. Well, listen, talk to Native Americans. They'll tell you something completely different. And, you know, and I'll give myself credit for one thing. Early on, I said to myself, well, look, if these guys were coming over here, who would know? The natives, and they know all about the people that were coming, and not just the Templars. They know about the Vikings. They know about all these cultures that came back here for thousands of years. And, you know, I mean, you know, people say, well, why don't they say anything? I go, well, why do you think? Look at what they went through.
Yeah.
The Templars warned them. They said the Christians are coming and it isn't going to be good. And guess what? Wasn't really good, was it?
No.
So Native Americans, they don't really care what white people think for obvious reasons. But I will say this, if you reach out to them in a respectful way, respect their culture and listen, they're like anybody else. You treat people with respect and you know, they can see through BS. They can tell if you're a genuine person. And if they trust you, they've told me some amazing things. I believe every word of it because it makes sense. And their oral traditions are not the telephone game. It's a very important thing in their culture that for a person to receive this ancient knowledge, first of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be selected.
Yes.
And it's associated with ritual, where there's sound, there's light, there's joy, there's pain, it's a multi-sensory experience. And the analogy that I use is, especially I say to women, do you remember the day that you gave birth? Well, yeah. Well, why? Well, besides the fact that you brought life into the world, there was a lot going on, right? And you were being bombarded. All of your senses were being bombarded. It was the most profound moment probably in your life. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not the same thing, but when people hear these oral stories, there's a lot going on. It's an honor. It's a privilege. It's not the telephone game. Yeah. And so we need to trust those people, but we have to earn that trust first.
Yeah, and actually, with a lot of the ancient mystery schools and a lot of the ancient text, most of this information that's key today in assisting us in our enlightenment stages, okay, it was all passed down from master to student, from teacher to student.
Mouth to ear.
Always.
Yep.
Always.
Yep. So this is why, now in fairness to the skeptics and the academics that have a problem with this, first of all, their brains aren't wired that way. And I get it because I have sort of that scientist academic side to me, but I also have this other side that I call my spidey sense, I guess you would say. I mean, it's intuition. We all have it. It's just a matter of how tapped into it you are. And, you know, I'm not as tapped into it as I should be, but I do try to listen to it. But a lot of these people that have a difficult time with this just aren't wired that way. And so they tend to reject something that they don't understand or they just can't figure out. And, you know, getting back to the runestone for a second, this epiphany discovery that we had upon initiation and realizing the person that wrote this was also initiated and used allegory, code, and symbolism within the inscription. If you're not initiated, you have no chance of figuring this out. And what has happened for the last 118 years now, the scholars have struggled with the runestone because they don't understand these concepts, at least not to the level that they need to be able to get to the bottom of this inscription and this mystery. So I can't stress the importance of this. And if I had never become initiated, there was always that last piece of the puzzle that I knew was out there that I just didn't understand. And now to fully understand it, it is so cool.
I know, and that link back to Osiris and Isis, oh my God.
Wait till you hear it. Wait till you hear it. But you got to come to the conference. Sorry, can't do it today.
Well, you know, they've offered me tickets, so I'm considering drive. I don't know. It's quite the haul from where I live, so we'll see.
Well, you know what? Once you get in the car, you throw on the tunes, you get there in no time. It'll be worth it, I promise.
Well, I'll look you up if I get up there.
You bet, you bet.
So tell me a little bit before we tie things up. We've got about 8 minutes here. Tell me a little bit about your book.
Okay. Well, I have actually 3 books that deal with the subject matter that I've already published. The first one you mentioned is called The Kensington Runestone, Compelling New Evidence. That one was published in 2006. The next book was called The Hooked X, Key to the Secret History of North America. That came out in 2009. My latest book is called Akhenaten, to the Founding Fathers, The Mysteries of the Hooked X. And really what that does is goes back to Egypt, brings it through Jesus and all the way to the Founding Fathers, because that's the thread, that's the historical thread. It's an ideological thread that is symbolized by the hooked X. And it's good stuff. And now, since that book came out in 2013, you know, the hooked X, Tao Cross on the Jesus ossuary. My God, if somebody said to me, okay, Scott, you can pick anywhere in the world, anytime, anything you want, you just tell us when you get to the bottom of the well with the hooked X, where would you like to find it? I couldn't have picked where I found it. It was better than anything I could have dreamed. And I don't know how you can deny it. Every single scholar, biblical scholar that I gave my explanation to about this, and they all agreed. Every one of them said, you know what? Alpha, Omega, yeah, you got it. So that was amazing. And now with this new discovery in the runestone, this new book that'll come out in about a year is going to be crazy. Hey, can I plug just a couple other quick things?
Sure. Go for it.
I'll encourage people, whether you're a skeptic or a supporter or you're in the middle somewhere, I don't care. Come to my blog, scottwolteranswers.blogspot.com. You'll see the trolls and all their comments and all their sarcasm and all their BS, but I let them post and I respond to them. And then, of course, there's plenty of supporters and people all over. But I say to people, look, I don't learn things from people who agree with everything I say.
Sure.
But again, if you're just going to come on here and troll and call us names and criticize the material, I'll let you post for a while and then I'll flush you. But if you have a dissenting comment or you have criticism that has some support, I want to hear it. I really do. The other thing is we have a website where you can see the books and see a lot of photos. It's www.hookedx.com, HOOKEDX.com. Check that out. And oh, one more thing. I want to plug my wife's new book. It's called America, Nation of the Goddess. She co-authored the book with Alan Butler. We just had a Skype call talking about new research with Alan. He's coming over here in a couple of weeks with his wife, Kate, and we're going to meet them on the East Coast and do a speaking tour. And I can't wait to meet Alan. But that book just came out in December, and it's awesome. The reviews are great. It really piggybacks on Akhenaten, the founding fathers, because it talks about America here, which is the nation of the goddess. And if you don't believe me, read the book.
Awesome. And just one last question. Was Akhenaten somebody that was not positive and beneficial for humanity? In your opinion, after everything you found?
No, he was the opposite. Akhenaten was the one who changed the religion from polytheistic dualism in Egypt to monotheistic dualism in Egypt. Basically, he changed from venerating the setting sun to the Aten, venerating the rising sun. And it was, in some ways, it's like, well, what's the difference? Well, there's a big difference. But when you look at, the crossed crook and flail on his chest, what people don't realize is not only does that symbolize the hooked X, but it also symbolizes Akhenaten's attempt to unite the two religions. The flail herds the bulls, the followers of Taurus, the old religion, and the crook herds the rams, the sheep of Aries, the new religion. And again, this gets back to procession. He came into power when the age changed from Taurus the bull and the Apis bull worship of old Egypt to Aries the ram, the new religion. And that cross, crook, and flail on his chest represents his attempt to unite the two religions. It failed. His followers were driven out. That's the Exodus, and eventually weaves into John the Baptist and Jesus and that whole story. I mean, it's a continuous thread. That's our history. That is our history in this country.
That is awesome.
He was a positive
I love
player.
it. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Scott?
He was a positive player. It was all good.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear it. And I am so jazzed to talk to you just because you're so great at connecting the dots. It's something that most people that are on the internet and doing a lot of research and seeking truth, this is truly what we're constantly striving to accomplish, is connecting the dots and trying to make some headway as to intuitively, does this really feel right? And the one thing I really want to stress to anybody that's out there, if you're reading anything about any of us that are of a so-called higher profile, step back and remember the adage, I think thou doth protest too much. if there is that much controversy and that much negativity written about a particular individual, then you really should step back and realize that we're in an inverted reality, and that which should be is not at this point in time. That's why we're all here, is to bring this truth to the light. So please support Scott. He will be, again, at the San Mateo County Event Center, and that's from April 29th through May 1st. And it sounds like a phenomenal workshop that you're giving. Please support him, and you can check him out again at Scott Wolter's Answers. Scott Wolter Answers.
Scott Wolter Answers.
Answers.blogspot.com.
And come on, I'll tell you what, I've got some wonderful blogs. I would write a blog after every show, and we got everything covered. There's a lot of great stuff there, but the last few threads have been about some of the things we've talked about when the big discoveries have happened that are really tying this all together. And one thing I will say, you brought up a really good point. Connecting the dots is very important. But as a forensic person, our job is to go out there and collect the evidence to try to see if it all fits. If you have a piece of evidence that's hanging out there, doesn't fit the thread, you're not there yet. And I can tell you that this myriad of collection of evidence that we have, it all fits. That's how you know you're on the right track. That's how forensics work. And believe me, if there's one thing I'll pat myself in the back on, I know how to do forensics. And this has been the most challenging thing I've ever worked on, but I think we're finally there. And it is what it is. And I just tell people, deal with it, because you're going to have to.
No, and we want to thank you, Scott, for literally marrying science with spiritual history. I think that's what you're really, truly bringing forth. And I think people are going to be so excited as they start digging more into the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah.
And again, everyone, please check us out at galacticconnection.com. We have a 365-day-a-year blog, as well as all kinds of services and goodies up there that assist you ultimately in freeing yourself from the matrix. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.